If I was a big tent revival preacher, that's what I could. What? Oh, am I already streaming? Okay, I'll leave that comment for after we're done streaming. So, I'm telling you, I told one of the other pastors in the area. I was like, because he actually watched a couple of the Sunday morning sermon series, and I told him, I'm like, hey, if you really wanted to see Candid, Alex, you need to turn to Sunday nights. You don't know what you're going to get because I don't manuscript on Sunday nights. I only got this, and we just go with it. So I have no script. So how's everybody doing? Good? All right. I know we got quite a bit, so we're going to try to get through this as quick as we can. If we remember, the last few weeks we've been going through each of the points of the gospel. We got the introduction, which deals with there are beliefs that you need to believe to be saved, to be a Christian, and we find those beliefs in Scripture. And so then we started with Genesis 1, where we started the basic God. This is God. Who is God? What did he do? And then last week moved on to this is man, and this is basically the problem. So if we look at this sequence here, God, man, Jesus' response. We're on the latter part of man and what our problem is here. Okay? So, last week I gave you about 5 ideas to kind of mess with, manipulate, kind of find your own ideas. So now we're going to go back through, and I'm going to show you these are the 5 ideas I wrote, and I'm going to tell you why, and we're going to kind of, maybe if you want to, you can rework some things. Okay? Kind of like what we did the last time. All right? So first here, 1, man was created by a good and loving God. First, we notice about that statement, it's simple. It's a simple statement. And that's what you want with a lot of these. You want simple, concise, something that someone can get easily. And they can go, oh, okay, that makes sense. They might not agree with it, but at the very least they can understand what you're talking about. Okay? Sometimes, again, we talk in language, I'll call it Christianese, where we use words that we have been taught for years and years and years. And we forget that the majority of the people around us have no idea what we're talking about. Okay? This first statement, man was created by a good and loving God. Is there anyone on this planet you think would be able to go, no, I still don't understand what you're talking about? They could say it, but then we go, okay, we need to have some other chats then probably. Yeah, but man was created by a good and loving God. It shows, first off, that we are the creation and that there is someone we answer to. Notice something about the statement, I am a good person. Whenever someone starts talking about them getting into heaven because they're a good person, that's usually the direction people go. You ask them, do you think you're going to go to heaven? Well, yeah. Well, why? Because I'm a good person. Well, in comparison to what? See, the thing is, people make the argument that they are a good person based off other people. I'm a good person compared to this person over here, this person over here, but there's no real standard, is there? The standard, when you really look at their argumentation about how they're a good person, they almost make themselves out to be the standard, don't they? And goodness all of a sudden becomes subjective. But with this first statement right here, man was created by a good and loving God. It shows that we are the creation. There is someone we answer to. There is someone by whom we are accountable to. And that being is God. We are accountable to God. We have to answer to God. Period. It also shows the character of the Creator. We have here, God is good and God is loving. Now, with both of those traits right there, what do we notice? That they are parts of God. That God just isn't just doing good things. God is good. God just doesn't do loving things. God is love. You cannot separate the definitions of goodness and love from God, because he is by definition the standard bearer for those two things. God is loving, God is good. He is the ultimate standard for that. So when we talk about what does it mean to be a good person, you've got to also go back to what? The standard. And how does that person measure up to the standard, which is God, to the definition? And it also connects the last big point to this. So we see man was created by a good and loving God. Okay? What did we talk about before man? We talked about God. So this connects that statement. It now connects man with God and shows where we come into play. Transitions help. We're telling a story here. We are giving one simple, concise story. So all these points have to fit together. So transition helps. Man was created by a good and loving God. We have that flowed from the last part where we described who is God and what did he do. Now we've gone straight from that into he created. And he created man. This good and loving God created man. Okay. So, with that first statement right there, if you did the homework this last week, don't feel bad if you didn't. It's okay, because I'm going to give you a few minutes. Who doesn't have anything? Does anyone not have something to write with? Is everybody good? Okay, good. Take a few minutes. If you already wrote down an idea, see if there's any way you want to improve it. Or take this first idea right here and put it in your own words. How would you, if you were talking about this to someone else, how would you put it? Jeff, I know you want to say it, but you can't say it yet. So you're already done. Good. So Jeff's already pretty confident. All right. Does anyone need more time? No? All right. Does anyone want to be brave? Jeff, you had something already, so I get to choose. I'm volunteering you to. Good. Yeah. First part. And you've hit the part. Okay? All I added in here was good and loving. But you've already talked about that in the last part with God. So it's like, wait a minute. That's even better right there. Just made, hey, God created man. Excellent. Anybody else? Yes. You made it personal. Good. Excellent. And don't be afraid to do that either. If you find a way to make it personal, because bottom line, they're going to feel more trust. People are going to be more trusting if you make it like, this is something that has affected me. If you start saying these statements that are just out there and you can't make it sound personal, it's going to come across as impersonal. People are going to go whoop-de-doo. Okay? Making it personal wherever you can is a good thing. So keep it. Yeah, that's awesome right there. Anybody else? Close. Yeah, you've connected the first two, but that works too. We'll get into the second one here in a second. But hey, right there with Ron, he's connected the first and the second idea here. That's fine to do, guys. If you find a way to make it simpler and you connect some ideas together, put them together later on, that's fine too. Just as long as you have not only the consistency, but also the substance of what we're talking about in there. Okay? So, that second idea, kind of a little bit what Ron just mentioned, God created man to be in a loving, obedient relationship with him. Now, first, shows we have a purpose. One of the great questions in life, great questions that people have, what is the purpose of life? Now, if you've read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, if you've read that book, you know that the answer is 42. Inside joke, it's a part of the book where I will explain to you guys. In this book, there's basically this computer, this supercomputer that this alien race has created, and they are asking what the meaning of life is to this computer, and finally at the very end, the computer comes up with the answer, 42. And that's it. So, great book. But here's the thing, guys. We have a purpose. We weren't just created just because God just came through and went, woo, bye. God has a purpose for us being here. There's a reason for us existing. And because it says God created man to be, this purpose was decided upon by God. There is atheistic thought, it's called atheistic existentialism, which basically says that purpose, we make our own purpose together. If you look at atheism, there's really two branches that come about when it comes to philosophy and worldview. There's nihilism, which says because man was basically an accident, that there is no purpose for life or being or anything like that. That's more the depressing atheism. Happy, quote-unquote, atheism is existentialist atheism, which says we make purpose for ourselves. But even that is a contradiction and doesn't really work out when it comes down to it. Neither side really works out when it comes down to it, if you take it to its logical extent. This shows right here that we are not the ones who made our purpose. We're not the ones who decide what mankind's purpose is. God has decided what our purpose is. God decided why he created man. We don't determine that. This shows the character of God. God created man to be in a loving, obedient relationship with him. So we have that loving aspect in there, that God intended man and him to be in a loving kind of relationship, and one that is marked with obedience to it. We were not created just to go do whatever we wanted to. God created us with the intent that we would be obedient to him, because he is creator, because he is worthy of that obedience, just by being God. So it shows the kind of relationship that we should have with God. There are plenty of relationships out there, plenty of different relationships, different kinds of relationships. There are different dynamics. A husband-wife relationship is going to be different than any other relationship. A friend relationship is going to be different than a father and son, mother-daughter relationship. Okay? There's some parents out there that say, I want to be my child's buddy. My father made it clear to me, I love you, but I am not your buddy. I am your father, and made that very clear to me. The dynamic is different. Our relationship with God, the dynamic is going to be unique, and that is marked by a loving obedience and reverence to God as God. So, second idea here, God created man to be in a loving, obedient relationship with him. Does that make sense? Is that kind of clear, concise there? Okay, one more time. We're going to do this 4 more times. One more time. Take some time. If you already have an idea, great. If you want to mess with it, great. If you don't have an idea, mess with this a little bit. Say it in your own words. Take a few minutes to write that down. All right? Does everyone have something? All right. I know Ron already kind of combined this a little bit, but does anyone else have anything? Anyone else want to try their hand at it? Maybe. Jeff? I can always count on Jeff to give you. That's fine. Good, I would take out the last half because we don't want to get into the end times just yet. We're kind of skipping over a little bit story. That's true, but we're skipping ahead a little bit with that one. But that one part right there that God did give us a paradise to live in, that is in this idea 3 right here. So we want to make sure, keep that in there. Keep that in there right there because and we'll go through why here in a minute. But still, good. Good that you took note of that. Okay? Anybody else? Take a stab. Did I mess something up? Did I mess up the order? Oh, that makes more sense. Okay. My bad on that one, guys. So, keep the paradise. We'll go through idea. We'll go through the next part here in a second, okay? Basically, with this next statement, why I separated those two when I looked at it, because both of these right here, so just to kind of explain it a little bit, first part talks about what God did and concerns the man, that he created man, and second part, that second statement right there, shows the relationship between God and man. So it shows what God did and how we're supposed to respond to what God did. So that's kind of why I put those two parts in there. Sorry if that was a little bit confusing on that one. Does that kind of make it a little bit more sense? Does that help out a little bit? Yeah, I know. 2 goes with 3. So just move that down. So 2 goes to your yeah. your number 2 on that one is actually number 3 on this list right here, on gospel script. The one I gave you tonight, number 3 was number 2's main idea last week. Sorry, I know, Ann, yeah, I know. Sorry. So, I know. Yeah. Ignore last week, basically. Take your ideas and mess with them a little bit. I know. Okay? That was my bad, because I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, and I kind of mess with things, and I tinker a little bit. I always want to make improvements as we go. And so if I find something better, sometimes I go, oh, this sounds better, and I'll type it in, and then I forget I've done something different with you guys than I did with, yeah. So my bad on that one. So just bear with me for a second. It all makes sense, hopefully, here in a minute. And if you need help, you know, come find me, okay? I'll help you out. You already answered number 3. That's fine. And here's the reason why to keep that paradise in there, that part in there. Two main parts to this. God gave man a paradise to live in and commands to obey so that man might live good lives forever with him. Okay? First, God gave man everything. And we want to make this clear because it makes the offense that man did that much more offensive. It shows, and we have to show how offensive what man did was. God gave man this beautiful paradise to live in. Everything he could have ever wanted, needed, or asked for. God gave everything. And God gave man commands. And we tend to think about God giving commands, and we instantly react to it. No, don't you dare tell me I have to obey. Why would God want to give obedience commands? That sounds harsh. But we need to understand something. I tell my son he can't go up to an electrical outlet and put his finger in it. Well, why do I do that? I know Jeff looks and like, why wouldn't you let him go touch the electrical outlet? No. But there's a reason why I don't let my son touch the electrical outlet. Why is that? It'll shock him. I want to protect my son. God gave commands in order to protect man, in order that man might live with him. So, God told man, don't eat of the tree. Was God being mean? No. He was trying to protect man because he knew that that tree was going to do what? Something terrible to man. Because man can't handle that. So God gave man commands. Explain in there in this statement that these commands were meant for man's good. They were meant to be good. God gave them to follow. God just didn't give commands so that people could go, that sounds nice. Meh, so what? God gave commands so that man might follow those commands, be obedient to those commands. Okay? God wanted man, desired that man would live forever with him. Now, granted, did God know that man was going to do what he did? Absolutely. But here's the thing. I want a lot of things, but do I know that probably I want a giant, I mean, there's a desire in me that would love a giant mansion over in the part of the hill, over near Cruz Farms. My wife keeps telling me about the houses over near Cruz Farms, and I look at her and I go, yeah, not with what we're doing. That's not happening. So my mother asked me, she's like, so when you get in your jet? And I go, well, when I preach heresy, which is never going to happen. So that's not going to happen. We want a lot of things that we know aren't or are going to happen, don't we? God knew what was going to happen, but his desire was to live with man forever, was to be in this communion with God, with man forever, in a loving, obedient relationship. And God wanted man to live good. So it's a longer statement, this number 3 right here, but it's concise. It's about as concise as I can make it. So, some of you have already marked down your number 3 idea, which was really number 2 last week. So does anyone want to take a stab at it? Joanne, yeah, you're good. That's fine. Yeah. Excellent. Right there. That is perfect right there. So that's simple, that's concise, that's right in line with what we want. Right there. Okay? Excellent. Anybody else? I know Ron and Jeff already gave theirs, so. Yeah, good, excellent. So, any other questions? Okay, good. So, we ask what happened. This would be idea number 3, which is idea number 4 on the notes for this week. Okay? That helps. Does that help a little bit? Kind of? Okay. Good. Man rejected this good God because man wanted to be in control, which introduced evil and corruption into creation. First, this puts the blame solely on man. And we need to first understand that. The blame for evil and corruption being introduced into the world is set on the feet of mankind. We're the ones at fault. When people ask what the problem with the world is, there should be one answer. Mankind is the problem. Okay? We're the ones who introduced evil into the world. By rejecting a good God, we instead brought about corruption, evil in its place. So, we are the ones at fault. The blame rests solely on man. It shows that evil and corruption is the result of this rejection of God. We talked last week. Again, God is the very definition of good. So we ask, what is evil? Evil is not a created thing. It couldn't have been. Because God, by definition, who is good, cannot create evil. And so we ask, what is evil? Evil is the absence or the corruption that takes place with the absence of God. So mankind pushes God aside, and what's left, that absence or that corruption, that's what evil is. And what sin really is that choice to push God aside in favor of this. Okay? So evil and corruption is the result of this rejection of God. People might not know what sin is, but they know what rejection means. Okay? You go up and you tell somebody, well, you're a sinner. Guys, the good chunk of people don't completely grasp what that means. Okay? But a lot of people understand what it means with a rejected relationship. Because a lot of people have been rejected before. And so they understand the pain that goes along with being rejected. And so when they hear something to the effect of, you rejected a good and loving God, that hits hard. And it should hit hard. People understand rejection. So, with that idea right there, yeah, Linda. And that's true. Mm-hmm. By God first, but why we go back to the first part where we rest the blame solely on mankind. God gave us everything, mankind rejected first. So we get to God rejected man later with the last part of this idea, but because there is an aspect to which that is true, but not how they think it. They've kind of twisted everything. Well, God rejected me, so I'm going to reject God. No. You got that backwards. So that's why we put it in the order. Exactly. Yeah. So take the hammer of, we talked in the missions committee today about the hammer that I brought out last year, of the hammer of Sylvia Wilson. So the mighty hammer of Sylvia Wilson. I don't know if you guys remember that from last year or not, but I got to go find that somewhere. So, you have it? Oh, you have the mighty hammer of Sylvia Wilson. So, but with this idea right here, Mary. A lot of them don't. the word. See, that they understand. But the word sin, and that's what I'm saying, the word sin doesn't have any context in today's culture. So if you say you're a sinner, they're going to go, I don't even know what that means. But if you say you've done wrong or you rejected God, something to that effect, where we talk about the definition of sin without mentioning the word sin, there's where we want to hit. Because sin could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And so what I'm really getting at is basically define your terms. Okay? That's what we have to get better at. Define what sin is. Because that's what we just saying you're a sinner, that doesn't have any context with them out there. Yeah, but here's the thing. They don't know what that means. There it is right there. Tell them what that means. Rejection. Sin is rejection. But sin is primarily rejection. It manifests in lies and cheat, stealing, all those things. But all of those things come from an internal rejection of God. Sin, as we see throughout Scripture, does it start with the action? No. It starts in the heart. And what happens in the heart? A choice is made. That choice to reject God in favor of our own way manifests in things like lying, adultery, murder, hatred, all those things. Those are symptoms of the disease. The disease is that rejection of God. And that's primarily what we got to deal with. Okay? Does that make more sense? Okay. Yeah. So basically what I'm telling you to do, yeah, but here's the thing. That's an English word that we've put in there. A Greek word 2,000 years ago is completely different. Okay? Sin is the word we've defined it as today. That's the word we use. Okay. No. So, it's what we call semantics, people. Okay? Semantics. I'm not asking you not to talk about sin. I'm asking you to define what it means. Oh, it's the right word, but the problem is the people out there, they don't know what that means. They don't know if you go up and say to someone, you are a sinner, they don't know what that means. Yeah. Yeah. So you go up and tell... And you can go that direction, but here's the thing. If they have no concept, because you got to understand something. Not everybody's even heard the word sin before. I have. Guess what? Welcome to my generation, folks. If you're wanting to talk to my generation at all, you got to understand something. They don't know those words. Yeah. Because sin is rejection. Period. Sin is rejection. Oh, but all those things are manifested from the rejection. The rejection is that beginning part. Here's why I say this, guys, and why this is so important. Guys, when we're dealing with sin, too many times in churches today, and I'm going on a tangent here, but too many times today, we deal with the symptom and not the disease. We deal with the effects and not the cause. Okay? The effects, as Jesus talks about in the Sermon on the Mount, all the Pharisees, all the Jewish people were doing, when he talks about adultery, they're going out and they're saying, you committed adultery, which is wrong, but they focused on the action and not the internal process that led to the action. That's where sin really begins. Sin does not begin with the action. Sin begins with the internal process. And that internal process begins when temptation actually becomes sin, is not with the action. It's with what's going on internally. Yeah. But there it is. You've made a choice internally to do that. Yeah. No, you're a liar when you choose. Just like Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, you're an adulterer by even looking at a woman with lust. That's not an action. That's an internal thing. Guys, this is how deep sin is right here. Okay? Sin does not begin. Temptation It's bad over here. We want to run away from temptation. But the second we start indulging in temptation is the second it becomes sin. It's that choice. And there's the thing. It's that choice to go away from God and go towards whatever it is we want to go do that's apart from God. Okay? It's a choice. So, that's what we need to understand right there. That choice begins internally, not externally. They don't know that yet, okay? Which is why we describe sin here as rejection, because they do understand rejection. There's not a single person on this planet that won't understand some form or another of rejection. No. Yeah, there we go. That's a good way to describe it right there. Okay? You are a sinner. You sin because you are a sinner. Okay? Not the other way around. Okay? We are sinners who sin. From the depths of our heart, we do what our heart is most inclined to go towards. And our hearts, apart from God, are inclined to go towards what? Sin. It manifests in those things. Okay? But here's the thing, like I've told you guys in church, we have done this where we attack the symptoms and not the disease, and we wonder why it's so hard to take care of sin in our lives. Well, let me tell you something. One of the first things I do with counseling with people, when it comes to sinful behaviors, all those things, is I ask them, what do you do when you're tempted? There's the kicker right there. Because someone who starts their reaction to temptation, when they start feeling that temptation, if their reaction isn't, well, I go into prayer or into Scripture, I go run right back to God, I guarantee you, they will go right and do whatever it is they're about to do. It is a lot harder to sin when you put your mind and your internal thought process, everything, on God. Okay? So, does that somewhat clarify that a little bit? Mary, or are you still confused? Well, you can have my thesis if you want, because that's what it was all over. So, if you want to be bored out of your mind with it, because it was probably, I will say that is what my thesis was over, and it was the most boring paper I've ever written in my life. So, if you want to tear your hair out by reading it, you're more than willing to have it. But I kind of told people I hope it gathers dust in the back of the library at Southern. So, but that's where the whole process comes in. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And there it is. There's another reason why we cannot define sin primarily based on actions. Because here's the thing. All those people are saying, well, I did this good act last week. Does that make a person good? No. Action doesn't define good and bad. Internal defines good and bad. Okay? God does not look at the action. What does God look at? The heart. The heart. Okay? Yeah. Yeah. Of course, but it's the manifestation of the sin. It's the symptom of the disease. Yeah. It's the symptom of the disease. But the sin is bigger than what we think it is. Okay, we want to define sin as primarily that action, that breaking of that rule. No, it's far more than that. It's a lot more than that. So that sin goes far deeper than just us breaking the rule. That's just what has come about from what's happened back here. But that's what we need to understand about sin. This is far deeper than we think it is. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Okay? Yeah. Yeah. There it is. When you define sin as primarily just the breaking of the rule, all of a sudden people can manipulate it. And they can mess with it and manipulate it. They can say, well, I did a good action down here that overrules this action over here. That doesn't work in the mind of God. That doesn't work with Him. So, yeah. Rejection. Rejection. It is our making that choice. That choice, a choice is an internal process, begins there. It begins in the heart, not with action. The actions come from what we've already decided in here. So we decide internally that we're going to do something, and then we make the action to go do it. Okay? But the sin encompasses that entire process. But that process begins with us rejecting God's law, rejecting God, rejecting everything of Him first. Okay? We have to make a conscious decision to reject Him first and then go this direction. Yeah. Bingo. That heart is where it begins. That's what God looks at. God looks at the heart and judges the heart. The actions just come forth as symptoms of the disease. Does that answer? Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. There it is. When you make that conscious choice to, instead of running right back towards God, you say, well, and you don't even have to do the action. Guess what, guys? Like I mentioned before, lust is not necessarily an external thing. Jesus says lust is sin in and of itself. If you looked at a woman with lust in your heart, you've already committed adultery. Okay? That's all in here. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's where sin is, the sin nature also comes into play. We are sinful people. We are sinners because we are human, because that has gone since Adam. So, does that help out? Does that make a little bit more sense, hopefully? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And what I'm basically saying is, guys, here's the thing, because you are going to encounter people today who don't know what the word sin means. And so what I'm basically saying with this idea right here, you have to define what that means. Okay? And if you use things like you're a liar, that might work, but here's the problem. Some people might say, well, I lied here, but everybody lies, and I went and saved Grandma from getting run over by a car last week, so why am I not a good person? Then you've got a problem. You've got a moral issue at that point. Because if you're defining sin based on the action, well, why doesn't this cancel out this? But here's the thing. God's not looking primarily at the action. God's looking at more. He's looking at the heart behind the action as well. That's why we can't define good actions based on the action alone. Good is not defined based on the action. Good is defined where? Here. Okay? So, that's why we go back and define sin as rejection here, because it has to start somewhere. Where temptation becomes sin itself is that point where we choose to reject God. So, sin is rejection. This good God was rejected because man wanted to be in control, which introduced evil and corruption into creation. Now, anybody want to try to take a stab at that? I know I kind of went off on a tangent a little bit right there, but that's okay. Yes, Al. Good. There it is. He thinks he has pride, and because of that, he thinks he can control his life. And so what is he going to do? He's going to reject God because he wants what God is. So good, right there. Simple, concise statement that flows from what we've just talked about. There's the problem. Yes. Good. Excellent. Anybody else want to take it? Jeff, you want to keep going? No. Yeah? Good, good. And you kind of, there it is, there's that last point, that consequence. So this last point right here, that's a good segue right there, right? The consequence for man's rejection is a corrupted creation, physical death, and separation from God and everything good forever. You want to make that clear with that last point, everything good forever, because here's what people tend to do, especially when it comes to hell, especially when it comes to these consequences. They go, separation from God, that doesn't sound too bad, does it? Bingo. I'm just going to be in hell with my friends. No, 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 no. That's not how this works, because remember, we define God as good and everything God created as good. So separation from God means that you are separated from all of His things forever. And so hell is not a place where you are with your friends. Hell is not a place where you're just fine, even though there might be some fire somewhere along the way or something like that. No, no, no. Hell is a place where you are alone in darkness with your own guilt forever. Why? Because you're separated from God. You're separated from God. You're separated from everything good from Him. Okay? So, the consequence for man's rejection is a corrupted creation, physical death, and separation from God and everything good forever. So how we look at this right here. God made man with a purpose. God gave everything to man to fulfill this purpose, to be able to live in this relationship with Him. But man said, no, we want to go our own way. And there are consequences, forever consequences to that, where man is destined to be separated from God and everything good forever because of the decision that mankind made. Okay? Now, does that make sense? Okay. Sorry, I messed up the numbers. I won't do that again. I'm sorry, guys. That kind of messed with you a little bit. So, does that work out? Do we have any other questions, comments, anything? Okay. Life is now no picnic. Yeah, that is true. Very true. So, yeah. All right. With that, do we have anyone who would like to pray to close us out? I can pray.